the Starfleet life with the USS Dauntless. Are you brave enough to be a Starfleet officer? Do you have what it takes? Greetings, I am Admiral Swart, Commanding Officer USS Dauntless, and this is the briefing with the Admiral for Stardate -269267.1. You may have noticed that there was no new briefing last week. That was because I had a laryngeal infection. I had no voice at the time of recording, so I was forced to cancel for the week. So we'll be covering that topic this week. You might hear my voice is still a little nasal and croaky. Apologies for that, but I'm sure we will manage. So today we're going to be talking about duty stations. Now, we've spoken about duty stations quite a lot in previous webinars, but we haven't done a dedicated episode specifically focusing on this topic. So we've covered it a bit here and a bit there. So for today, we're going to be taking all those clumps together and putting them together into a nice cohesive, hopefully cohesive exploration of what duty stations are, what they're for, how do we do them, how do they work, so that this can serve as a point of reference for people in the future. So if you are up to date with all of the briefings, if you've been following along, you will probably have heard most of this before, but hopefully it will serve as a handy refresher. If you are new to the briefings, then hopefully this will also be useful in that way. So when we talk about a duty station, what do we mean by that? What is a duty station? Let me show you. All right, so aboard the USS Dauntless, we have two broad different types of members: active duty and non-active duty. And each of those is broken down into subcategories. Non-active duty are people like reserves and passengers. We've done a whole webinar on types of membership, so if you would like to know more about those, you can go and refer to those. But today we're talking about one of the kinds of active duty members. So active duty members are people who are, as the name suggests, actively involved in Dauntless activities. And we have three different subcategories of active duty members. We've got, in reverse order, we've got recruits. These are people, as the name suggests, who are new to the ship. They're still figuring out what their place in the ship is going to look like. They're learning about our systems and our ways of doing things, and they are in the process of deciding which department they'd like to serve in. Then we have standard position holders, which is the majority of the crew. So these are people who are interested in being actively involved in Dauntless activities, but they don't necessarily want to, or they're not yet ready to commit to a specific set of deliverable requirements. They don't want to sign up for a specific job yet, for whatever reason. Maybe it's a transitional stage, maybe they just prefer to be able to help out here and there without having to conform to a specific set of guidelines, that kind of thing. There's any number of reasons why somebody might want to remain a standard position holder. But today we're going to be talking about duty stations or duty station holders. So these are volunteers who are prepared to be actively involved in the running of the ship. We hope that all members will choose to be duty station holders. For this reason, these members are awarded rank promotions and other accolades at a higher rate than all other members in recognition of their efforts. Volunteering is prestigious, and we endeavor to make sure it's never thankless. So, duty station holders are volunteers. We are a fan-run organization, a volunteer-run organization, and the volunteers who do all of the work aboard the Dauntless, well, not all of it, but most of the work aboard the Dauntless, these are the duty station holders. So they are people who have committed to performing a specific set of deliverable outcomes regularly, be it daily, weekly, monthly, annually, that are essential to the operation of the Dauntless as a unit, as an organization. So we have a couple dozen of these duty stations on board, and we'll go through some of those and see what they look like in a minute. But first I want to cover what are the reasons you might have for wanting to be a duty station holder. What are your reasons for becoming a volunteer aboard the Dauntless? So firstly, the one I'd mention would be career advancement. So as I mentioned here, these members are awarded rank promotions and other accolades at a rate than all other members. So if you are a duty station holder, you are more actively involved in the running of the Dauntless day to day than standard duty holders. standard position holders, which means that you're doing more stuff and you're doing more things that are worthy of recognition than other people are in general, which means that you're going to earn things like rank promotions and awards and commendations faster than other people. So if you're interested in advancing your career in Starfleet, to climbing up that ladder rank and making your way to higher and higher levels of respect to build that reputation, then a duty station is a good way to get you there. It earns you that respect that you might otherwise not be possessing, that you might lack or that you might desire. Second factor is recognition and prestige. Now that relates to the first one. So recognition and prestige, firstly, is codified in the form of rank promotions and awards and that kind of thing, but it also makes you more visible in the eyes of the crew around you. If you are a duty station holder, people in the crew, in the Dauntless crew, will be seeing you do the things that you do. They will recognize you. They will hopefully admire you and think that you're doing cool things if you are a duty station holder. So recognition and prestige among your peers might be something that motivates you to get involved. Thirdly, we're looking at skill development. We've spoken a lot about how aboard the Dauntless, a lot of our systems are very complicated. We are technology-minded people, so we tend to employ technology in the way that we do things. But not only technology, various other interesting things are employed, various tools and systems and protocols. And nobody going into a duty station is expected to have all the skills, to know all the things. So what we have is, and I'll go into this detail about this a little later, we have an induction process that allows us to train people who have signed up for duty stations on the job. So you don't necessarily know how to do the work on arrival, you just have to have an interest in it. And we will go through all of the tools, all the protocols, all the systems, and help get you up to speed. So it is, in a sense, a free skills development tool, skills development program. You can learn how to do interesting new things, and we'll just show you how to do it. You don't have to go to university. You can come to the Dauntless and just sign up for the work and learn how to do it. So skills development is useful. You also, you might seek out increased responsibility. This is something that a lot of people crave. If you're the kind of person who really feels like taking an interest and taking action in your community and in your space is important. If you want to be involved in making the decisions, then you need to be a duty station to do that. Duty station holders are on Discord channels and panels that other members are not. So to be a duty station holder means that you are going to be consulted by the command staff when making decisions in a way that standard position holders typically aren't. So duty station holders have more responsibility, not just within the confines of their specific duty station, but in terms of the broader running of the Dauntless. Another reason might be community engagement. So the Dauntless is, among other things, a community. There's a bunch of people here and we are involved in being social together. We build and operate a community. And if you would like to be interacting with that community at a deeper level, at a more comprehensive level, there's arguably no better way of doing that than as a duty station. Every single duty station aboard the Dauntless requires a certain level of engagement with the rest of the crew that is over and above simply being friends or simply participating in missions. You're involved in connecting with other people to make things work, whether you're organizing with other duty station holders to get your job done, you're obtaining resources, having conversations, making decisions, or perhaps you're interfacing with standard position holders, trying to convince them to participate in your activities, getting information from them, delivering information to them, that kind of thing. Community engagement might be a very stimulating thing for you, as it is for a lot of people. And then, of course, there's personal fulfillment. Perhaps you, as a person, enjoy the feeling of being able to give back to your community. If you're the kind of person who likes to feel like they're involved, who are making a contribution, whether that be through leadership or service or leadership as service, personal fulfillment is an often neglected but very important motivation that might encourage people to sign up for a duty station. And then, of course, there's the fact of enhanced opportunities. The more connections you make, the more skills you acquire, the more reputation you build, that opens up doors for advancement, not only within the Dauntless, but also Region 8, within Starfleet International as a whole, and even outside of Starfleet. Building those connections, building those relationships, getting to know people, building that network of people that know you could open doors for opportunities in all aspects of your life, social, professional, you name it. So plenty of good reasons to want to become a duty station holder, to become a volunteer within the Dauntless. Before we move on to the next part of my presentation, I'd like to just welcome everybody who's here. I see Captain Van Grienen, we've got Colonel Hubert, we've got Master Chief Kotze, Senior Chief Newton, and Crewman Matthews. Thank you for joining us here. Not to worry, those of you who missed the first minute or two, as you know, things have a way of catching up. You're welcome to catch up on the video after the fact. Although we are streaming live to our Discord screening room and also to YouTube, this video will be available for offline viewing after the fact on both YouTube and Facebook. We'll post it there too, if that is something that interests you. Do we have any comments? Oh, Captain Van Kerner says duty station ops also helps you with being a shy person. Absolutely. That kind of thing, social anxiety in particular, it thrusts you into a position of having to build and maintain personal relationships with other people, which is a kind of exposure therapy to people who have social anxiety. So that's for me over the years that's been very useful, and I think it has been for other duty station holders as well. All right. Okay, so those are the reasons why you might want to be a duty station holder aboard the Dauntless. But let's look at some examples of what a duty station looks like. There are essentially 5 broad categories of duty station holders. And the first one, the one that is probably the most prolific, is department heads. So here is Captain Van Groenen, who is our Chief Science Officer. And I'm going to look at his position as CSO because it's a pretty good example of the kind of department. So we have 7 departments on board. And each department has a department head, including command. Although I am the de facto department head of command, my job description looks a little different. But a chief science officer is a nice typical example of what a department head looks like. So I'm going to use that as an example. So here we have the chief science officer, who is currently Captain Johan van Groenen. The Chief Science Officer is the department head for the science department of the USS Dauntless. The department head acts as a communication conduit between the command department and the science department. Command department, although they are a department in the same sense that everybody else does, command's role aboard the ship is a little bit different to everybody else's. That's a complicated organogram. The CSO is the curator of Dauntless's onboard library and educational resources and manages the creation of certification courses. This position may not be held by an enlisted member. Because of the kind of duties that a duty station holder is required to perform, which typically involves maintaining lines of communication with individual members, that requires a certain amount of personally identifiable information being shared with those department heads. So we require that those members have completed the officer training school at Starfleet Educational Services and also the SFDPP, the Starfleet Data Privacy Policy certifications at Starfleet Educational Services, so that we as department heads can be up to speed on the current international and internal regulations regarding handling of private personal information of members. Even if it's just an email address or a WhatsApp phone number or something like that, we want to make sure that we're handling that information responsibly and correctly in terms of regulations. Senior Chief Newton says, something tells me the captain unknowingly volunteered to appear in today's briefing. So that's a good point, and it's something I didn't include on my agenda today, but it's worth noticing. So department heads in particular are, because we are the senior staff of the Dauntless, we are also the faces of the Dauntless crew. So we are expected to represent the Dauntless with our faces, and that includes having photographs on the website, and also we are all required to have correct and accurate uniforms. Now, I've done a briefing on uniforms, and I've also done briefings on presenting yourself professionally and making sure that you look good and that kind of thing, and that is especially important when it comes to duty stations in general and department heads, senior staff in particular. We have to be prepared to represent the Dauntless with our faces, even if that makes us a little uncomfortable sometimes. Right, so that's why this position may not be held by an enlisted member. And we move on to the duties and qualifications. First, we look at the duties. What does the Chief Science Officer's job look like? So the science department is responsible for research and education, which are 2 very big words that involve a lot of things. But specifically, we have some internal educational resources that we use for our crew, which includes things like the new member orientation course that all new crew members are required to complete before they can become standard position holders. So that's recruits. Remember, we spoke about recruits at the beginning. Recruits are required to go through that new member orientation. There are also additional orientation courses available for people who serve particular functions on board, like away team leaders. We had one for our Marines, although we no longer have a Marine unit on board. We had a dedicated orientation course for them. We are also in various stages of very slow development of an assortment of orientation courses for the other departments, which will hopefully go live at some point. I think it's been years in the making at this point. It's very slow, but those are underway. And it's the science department and the chief science officer's role to manage the creation and curation and keeping of those resources, making sure that they remain up to date when Dauntless policies are changed. We need to change the orientation courses to reflect those changes. Also keeping track of who aboard the Dauntless has completed which certifications. When we're talking about Starfleet Educational Services, they already have all those processes in place to manage who in Starfleet International has completed which educational services courses. This is our sort of internal version of that, which is run by the Chief Science Officer with assistance from his team. So that is what these duties relate to. Then we're talking about linguistics, which is operating the Dauntless Linguistics Challenge for the crew. We've done a whole webinar on challenges and various webinars on personal development or mission readiness. One of the aspects that we involve in that is the linguistics challenge, in which we encourage our crew members to learn a new language using the tool Duolingo, which is a free language learning app, somewhat gamified, and it helps you to learn how to speak other languages. And in order to help encourage that, we have a monthly challenge rolling from month to month, where we each compete against each other to earn the most experience points within the Duolingo platform. And it is the Chief Science Officer's job to administer that. So that is both administering the Duolingo classroom, they call it a classroom, which is really what the leaderboard functionality is, and also acting as a moderator for the various places where we would have conversations for that. So we have a dedicated Discord channel where we talk about the linguistics challenge and linguistics related issues in general. And again, it's the Chief Science Officer's job to manage those areas and those resources. So that includes registering new participants in the challenge, assisting participants with technical issues. If you're having trouble with Duolingo, it's the CSO's job to help them get online. Also, that's tallying the monthly winners, so checking the logs of the Duolingo classroom to see who's logged the most XP, and if there's interest in organizing sort of a secondary meta challenge, as we currently have going on. We have sort of a rolling 3-month championship challenge system happening at the moment that Captain Van Kernen is running for us. Then that also falls under his responsibility to do that kind of thing, and then announcing the monthly results on or before the 3rd of the following month. So although the platform tallies those results for us automatically, that then needs to be communicated to the crew, and that is the Chief Science Officer's role to do that. So those are the things that are specific to the Chief Science Officer. So that is the research and educational side of things. But then we have the more kind of generic stuff that is common to all department heads, and that is departmental supervision, maintaining open lines of communication with the members of the science department. This requires attempting to have at least one communications exchange with each member of the department per calendar month. This may be in the form of a face-to-face meeting, a telephone conversation, an instant message conversation, an email exchange, or anything of a similar nature. So this is what Captain Quintrino was talking about in his comment a moment ago about it requires you to get used to maintaining social relationships, and that is this aspect of it. When we are talking about the kind of organization that the Dauntless is, we don't live in one place. We don't see each other every day in a workplace or anything like that. We are all in our respective homes, keeping up with the Dauntless on our own like that. It can be somewhat isolating, especially for members who perhaps are the only crew member in a specific town or city, which what we call a sector. If you're the only crew member in a sector, it can feel a little bit isolating. So it's up to the department heads to make sure that the crew members under their command within their department feel like they have an active connection to the rest of the crew. And that involves trying to have a communication exchange with each crew member under their department per month. Now, that doesn't necessarily have to be a very taxing or difficult communication exchange. We don't necessarily have to meet for coffee, although that might be nice if that is convenient and if it's the kind of thing that you like. It might just be a quick text saying, "Hey, you okay?" "Yes, I'm okay." What we would like to see is the crew report. So I've done an entire webinar on reporting, and an important part of our reporting structure. We have reporting at every level of the organization from the bottom all the way to the top. And that the bottom level of reporting involves crew reports. So each member of the crew is asked to submit a monthly report detailing their activities that might be of interest to the Dauntless command crew. So that's internal activities within the Dauntless, but also external activities that might be of interest, things that might earn you recognition for awards or something like that. So any of that kind of information that you might have, we have a preferred structure, and we ask that crew members submit those reports to their department heads at the end of every month. It's not mandatory, but it's strongly encouraged, and that would serve as this communication exchange, is the receipt and acknowledgement of these monthly crew reports. Further to reporting is the next responsibility of the department head, which is reporting. So submitting the departmental monthly status reports, or the DMSR, to the executive officer on or before the third of each calendar month. This report must include information such as promotion nominations, award nominations, planned or past events when applicable, as well as the success or failure to contact members of the department. So once the department head has done his or her monthly roundup of all the crew reports from his department, he or she will then compile those into his or her monthly report, the DMSR, which is submitted to the command staff, the XO or the CO. And that gives a summary of all the information that they have obtained from those various independent reports, as well as any other comments or concerns or questions that might want to be run up the flagpole. So that happens once a month. Next is logging. Write a regular column for the crow's nest. Excuse me, my voice is flagging a little bit. I'm just going to take a little sip of my beverage. Excuse me. All right, so writing a regular column for the crow's nest. Now, what is the crow's nest? That used to be our internal newsletter. We've been experimenting over the last couple of years. In fact, we no longer consider it a newsletter at all. The crow's nest is now an internal video series. It's kind of irregular. It comes when it comes. So we don't really have columns for that. So this requirement is a legacy of that old system where the crow's nest was a newsletter, but it's still a requirement of department heads that they submit content for inclusion in those crow's nest videos from time to time, as and when relevant. So we've left it in, but this probably needs to be reworded because things have changed since these were written. Next is delegation, which is performing any and all duties at the department. Performing any and all duties the Deputy Chief Science Officer is unable to perform. So every department head on board has a deputy. There is a DCSO. And if the DCSO is unable to do any aspect of his or her job, then those duties flow up to the Chief Science Officer, because the Chief Science Officer's job is to make sure that all of the work included in his or her department is done. And if the person who is assigned to that duty is unable to complete that work, then it's up to the Chief Science Officer to do that work for them. Ideally, that wouldn't happen, but it happens more often than you might expect. Next is Officer of the Watch, which means to monitor Dauntless communications channels during convenient hours and take swift action should any inappropriate content be posted or other issues arise. So this is a duty that, again, belongs to most senior duty station holders. They're required to be moderators on all Dauntless communication channels. So whenever relevant or whenever convenient, we will be keeping an eye on communications on various different channels. And if anybody says something that probably shouldn't have been said, or posts something that probably shouldn't have been posted, then whoever sees it first should take action on that, either remove that piece of content or have a word with the person who posted it. That doesn't happen very often, but we do need to remain vigilant. And we also have automated tools on most platforms that help us to find these potentially inappropriate posts with AI without necessarily having to spot it ourselves. So it's a relatively easy job, but it's an important one, and it's one that belongs to most senior staff members. Captain Fincrena says, "We are a nice bunch of well-behaved people." Yes, I think the worst thing that happens these days is somebody occasionally says a naughty word, which frankly I don't care about. And the next one is fleet operations, which is collaborating and coordinating with science communities within Region 8 and Starfleet International. So this is, again, something that you'll find in every department head position. There are regional and fleet-wide counterparts of every department on the Dauntless, and it's part of the department head's job to collaborate, to reach out to, form a relationship with, and to work as a proxy of those regional and fleet departments or auxiliaries. So in the case of science, there is Starfleet Sciences, which is the big auxiliary within Starfleet International. They also have a regional component. In Region 8, there'll be a designated science representative here in Region 8, and it's the Chief Science Officer's job to establish and maintain relationships with people at both of those levels. So once again, there are each department head has duties that are specific to that department. So in the case of science, we're looking at curriculum oversight and linguistics. And then there are generic requirements that belong to all department heads, which are departmental supervision, reporting, logging, delegation, the watch, and fleet operations. Now, everybody on board reports to somebody, and in the case of a department head, they report to the executive officer, who is the second in command of the Dauntless. And then there's a list of qualifications that a department head would need to have in order to apply for the position. Now, this is a little less black and white than it used to be. It used to be that you simply had to have all of these requirements before you even applied. That is no longer the case. Now, with our new induction process, and again, there's a separate video about the induction process if you'd like to take a look at that, but we'll be talking a bit about it shortly. These are what we would like you to have. But in order to begin the induction process, you don't need to necessarily have any of these already lined up. During the first or second stage of the induction process, we, the induction team, will be helping you, the applicant, to check off all of these items before you move on to the next step. So we will actually assist you in planning and acquiring all of your prerequisites. There are also some others that are related to your activities, such as you have to be an active participant in a bare minimum of 50% of all Dauntless science activities measured over a 3-month time frame, including online and in-person activities, as well as monthly challenges. And the applicant must also be an active user of Discord and Trello. Trello might change. That has been our operations platform for some time, but we are in the process of evaluating a replacement. But again, these will be measured and tracked and worked out during the induction process. So you don't necessarily have to have these going in. But before you move on to the on-the-job training stage of the induction process, these will need to be squared away. Right, so these are the requirements for a duty station holder, specifically a department head. Now let's look at a deputy department head, which is, you'll see, is very similar. So we're going to look at the Deputy Chief Science Officer for a matter of comparison. We currently have no Deputy Chief Science Officer. This position is vacant. So if you are interested in filling that position, you can head over to this page. You'll find it on the Dauntless under Departments, Science. Click on the Apply Here link, and that'll take you to an application form, which will then kick off the induction process. If that interests you, you'll find that a lot of this material is very similar. The Deputy Chief Science Officer, DCSO, is the Deputy Department Head for the Science Department of the Dauntless. Deputy Department Head acts as a reserve for the department head. So in other words, if the department head is ill or has to take a couple of days off or is out of contact for a while, then the DCSO can step up and fill the position of the CSO on a temporary basis as needed. If held by an enlisted member, use the title Chief Science Non-Commissioned Officer, CSNCO. The CSNCO is not in line to replace the CSO. Unlike the department head, the deputy department head can be held by an enlisted member, so somebody who has not completed the OTS exam. And if so, then they just have a different title. So instead of being the Deputy Chief Science Officer, they would be the Chief Science Non-Commissioned Officer. So that's just a different thing between those two levels. But then that also means that if you're an enlisted member, you cannot then escalate and become the Chief Science Officer. You have to become a commissioned officer before you ascend that level. So duties and qualifications of the DCCSO. So all of those department-specific things are eliminated here. Because the DCCSO doesn't, we're not looking to have all of those same requirements necessarily in the DCCSO that we have for the CSO. There's less personal identifying information in the hands of the DCCSO, so there are less duties associated with it. So managing the curriculum and what was the other one, the linguistics challenge, those typically would not be in the hands of the Deputy Chief Science Officer. But the deputy department head can assist with duties like departmental supervision. So if the CSO is unable to reach out to every member of the department in a given calendar month, then the deputy may do so on their behalf. In fact, it wouldn't be the worst idea for both the deputy and the chief to have a shared communication with each member of the team every month, just so that everybody's up to speed on what's going on. The deputy may also submit the departmental monthly status report (DMSR) on the department head's behalf if the department head is unable to do so, and delegation, which is in performing any and all duties the duty stations within the science department are unable to perform. Now, there are no other duty stations in the science department at this point, so that is just there as a placeholder in case we later include further duty station positions within the science department. But as of now, it's just those two, the department head and the deputy department head. So the deputy reports to, as you might suspect, the chief science officer, and you'll notice that the qualifications list is a little bit shorter. So for the deputy chief science officer, we require that they have completed the SFDPP certifications at the academy. Again, these would be included in the induction process. But for the chief science non-commissioned officer, there is no SFDPP requirements. So what that means is that if this position is held by a non-com, they would not have access to the personal identifying information of the crew. And then there are privileges. I didn't mention the privileges of the chief science officer, but it's fine. We'll go through the ones of the deputy. For the deputy chief science officer, on appointment, the DCCSO is granted a conditional promotion to the grade of 03, lieutenant or marine captain. After holding the position for continuous 6 months, the promotion becomes permanent. So the position comes with a promotion. If you are not already a lieutenant at the time that you are promoted, then at the time that you are appointed, then you will gain a promotion at the time of appointment. When the CSO position becomes vacant, the DCSO is automatically considered an applicant for the position, regardless of his or her qualifications. Note that that doesn't necessarily mean that the deputy automatically becomes the new department head, just that they are automatically considered as a potential replacement. There might be reasons why the command staff decide not to appoint the deputy straight away or at all. And for the chief science non-commissioned officer, on appointment, the non-com is granted a conditional promotion to the grade of 07, which is chief petty officer or gunnery sergeant. And after holding the position for 6 continuous months, the promotion becomes permanent. That last bit is important because we don't want people just seeking out appointment to duty stations so that they can get that automatic promotion. You need to have to earn it, which involves doing the job for some period of time. Captain Van Heijnen says privileges can have tribbles. No. Tribbles are illegal in the Federation. You may not have tribbles. All right, so those are deputy department heads and department heads, but there are a handful of other duty stations which are a little bit different. If we look at the command department, we'll notice that these are quite different. So here's the commanding officer. Some of these duties are the same as the regular department head, but a lot of them are different because the commanding officer is one of 2 positions that are mandated by Starfleet International. We are required to have a commanding officer and an executive officer. So they both need to be filled, and there are certain requirements handed down by SFI that those positions have to have, specifically as it relates to qualifications. So the CO and the XO both have to have completed the OTS, the Officers Command College, also at Starfleet Academy or Starfleet Educational Services, and the Starfleet Data Protection Policy, SFDPP certifications, and that is a recurring certification that needs to be updated and renewed annually. So both the CEO and the XO need to be doing those. There are other requirements that we have, which include educational services requirements, but those are unique to the Dauntless. They're not specific to Starfleet International. So in the CO, the duties here relate to being the chairman of the organization. So that is firstly reporting, which is submitting the MSR, the monthly status report to Starfleet Operations and the regional coordinator on or before the 5th of every calendar month. So that's my monthly obligation to report on behalf of the entire USS Dauntless. I'm also responsible for making decisions on all matters of Dauntless policy. I am required to represent the Dauntless in our regional coordinator elections every 2 years. It's my job to update this list of duty stations, actually, to make sure that this is up to date. So all of those things that are out of date, like the references to the crow's nest, that's my fault. I just haven't updated those yet, but I'll get to it. It's on my list. Approving or rejecting promotions all the way up to the rank of commander. As commanding officer, I have that authority under Starfleet International regulations. Assignments, so whoever has requested assignment to either a standard position or a duty station, I am the final arbiter of who gets which positions, but I typically take advice on all of those appointments. brand supervision. As the president of the organization, I am responsible for, I'm the custodian of the Dauntless brand. I have to make sure that we don't get ourselves into trouble and make ourselves look bad by saying or doing the wrong thing. Moderation. So when it comes to being an officer of the watch, I have the final say in that kind of thing. But also when it comes to ingoing and outgoing communications on behalf of and within the Dauntless, I have to act as moderator for all of that stuff. So not just individual person-to-person communications, but also official communications between departments, between chapters, between all of that kind of thing. I have to review and act as the final arbiter on whether or not those things go out. Dispute resolution: if any members have any hassles with each other aboard the Dauntless, it's my job to help them sort that out. I'm also the chairperson of all official Dauntless meetings. We haven't had a Dauntless meeting in, I don't know, 15 years or something. But if we decided to have another one, I would automatically be the chairperson of that. Again, officer of the watch, which is similar to moderation. Fleet operations, which is standard department head stuff. I have to coordinate with my counterparts at Region 8 and Starfleet International. And also, I'm required to step in and do any work that the executive officer is unable to perform. Who do I report to? I report to the regional coordinator of Region 8. Which also happens to be me, which is a little bit awkward. So I report to myself, but that's how that works. My qualifications are a little bit different, but not that different. It's mostly the same things, just perhaps a little bit difficult. More difficult, I need to have a bridge officer certification. My active participant levels are a little bit different to most other department heads, and the list of tools that I need to be familiar with is longer than anybody else's. But other than that, it's not dissimilar. The privileges of a commanding officer, these are dictated by Starfleet International. On appointment, the CO is granted a conditional promotion to the grade of 06 or captain. After holding the position for 6 continuous months, the promotion becomes permanent. And upon leaving the position, the outgoing commanding officer may select his or her own replacement. That is unique to the Dauntless. Each chapter has a certain amount of autonomy and are granted the right to choose how they select their own commanding officers. In the case of the Dauntless, it is the leaving commanding officer chooses their replacement. So when my predecessor, who is now Admiral Kim Donahoe, when she stepped down as commanding officer of the Dauntless, she selected me as her replacement, and she was in turn selected by her predecessor, now Admiral Tom Donahoe. Colonel Uber says, become Fleet Admiral to change the rule about tribbles, I believe that is. And Captain Van Krenen says, raising a dispute over tribbles. Unfortunately, the Fleet Admiral is not qualified to change the rule about tribbles because it's not a Starfleet regulation. It is in the entire Federation. So you would have to become the president of the United Federation of Planets to change the law about tribbles. And even he probably doesn't have that power because presidents really aren't all that impressive. All right, so that is the commanding officer. Executive officer, again, is fairly similar. So it's a lot of the same requirements that the commanding officer has, but in almost every one, it's deferring to the CO. So the XO will do the job unless the CO needs to do it. One of the things that's different is that this XO is expected to collate the DMSRs on behalf of the CO. So each department head submits their monthly report, the DMSR, to the executive officer, who then prepares a single report which is handed on to the commanding officer, and the information in that combined report is combined with chapter level stuff by the commanding officer, which is then handed on to the regional coordinator. Otherwise, mostly the same stuff. The requirements are very similar. Even the privileges are very similar, except the built-in promotion goes to commander instead of captain. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same. Second officer is a little different. Before we carry on, Master Chief Costa says, I think they can start their own chapter, perhaps to get the tribbles approved on that ship. No. Starfleet vessels are not sovereign territory. All vessels of Starfleet are subject to the laws of the United Federation of Planets, and tribbles are banned everywhere in the Federation. Sorry. All right, so second officer is the junior vice president of the USS Dauntless. We don't currently have a second officer. This position may only be held by a member of SFI in good standing, so if you are not a member of SFI, you're not eligible for this. It can, however, be held by an enlisted member under the title Command Master Chief. So the role of the second officer is to manage the reserves contingent of the crew. So this is another one of the categories of members. So reserves are one of the two kinds of inactive members. So these are people who want to be members of the Dauntless, but don't want to be too involved in the day-to-day running of the ship or day-to-day activities of the ship. So they become reserves, and it's the second officer's job to manage relationships with those reserves. That which involves just keeping an eye on what they're doing, checking to see when and if they chip in on Dauntless activities and making a log of that, and also reaching out to them once a year. So where a department head would reach out to each active duty member of their department once a month, the second officer reaches out to each reserve member once a year just to make sure that they're still alive and they're still interested in continuing to be a reserve member and maintaining that list, making sure that everybody's still in place. There are also some of the activities, some of the responsibilities from the XO and the CO that could fall onto the SO if those two members are not available. So if both the CO and the XO are out of communication, then the SO kind of becomes the de facto commander of the vessel for a while, but that is all temporary. The qualifications again are fairly similar, and this one comes with an automatic promotion to lieutenant commander if you're an officer, or master chief petty officer if you are enlisted. Then we have the recruiting and deputy recruiting officer. Recruiting officer is responsible for processing membership applications and assisting with the orientation of new members of the Dauntless. The RO also acts as an effective department head for recruits until they are assigned to a department. So recruits are active duty members who haven't yet decided what part of the vessel they'd like to serve in, and they are undergoing the onboarding process or the orientation process. And it's the recruiting officer's job to firstly maintain relationships with those individual members who are new members of the Dauntless, and also to assist them going through that orientation process. So the orientation educational materials are administered by the chief science officer and the recruiting officer together. They would typically collaborate on that material, but it would be the recruiting officer's job to actually administer the course, to submit them, to send the material to the new recruits and to get them to complete the exams, and then would also keep the chief science officer appraised of the progress of each individual new recruit. The recruits, as long as they haven't yet selected a department to be assigned to, are all fall under the command department, but actually they can't really fall under the command department, so we've created a kind of temporary kind of sort of department called reserves, the reserve pool, and the recruiting officer. I keep no, reserves. We're talking about recruits here, not reserves. We have a recruits pool, and it is the recruiting officer's job to look after the recruit pool, kind of sort of as if they were a department. So he submits ADM Swart on their behalf, and he maintains communication with them. And then there are various other activities that are relevant to most duty station holders, like being officer of the watch and fleet operations. The recruiting officer also needs to be uh, um, fairly qualified. So there's a long list of qualifications there, including the Starfleet data protection policy. But this position can be held by an enlisted member as the recruiting non-commissioned officer. Then there's a deputy position to assist the recruiting officer, which again has a simplified version of their requirements. Okay, so those are the duty stations in the command department, which are kind of unusual and they're different to most. Another one that stands out is the ship's quartermaster. So within the operations department, you've got the chief operations officer, which is a standard department head. You've got the deputy chief operations officer, which is a standard deputy department head. And then you have the ship's quartermaster, which is quite a unique role. So the ship's quartermaster is responsible for assisting the crew in obtaining and assembling uniforms. Not only uniforms, but other physical objects that they might need to as part of their experience, but focusing primarily on uniforms. So uniforms are an important part of our presentation in the world. It matters that we are recognizable by other people, either within the organization or outside, and putting together those uniforms can be relatively challenging. Again, we've done a whole video on uniforms, which is worth going back to if you'd like to take a look at that. But because it can be daunting and difficult, people often need help, especially if you're new to the crew. So that is the quartermaster's role, is to assist members, new and old, in assembling the uniforms that they need. So that is maintaining a list of accepted uniform types. So we have that list. must be available to the crew upon request. It is nearly fully updated and available on the Dauntless main computer, our internal website, if you'd like to take a look at that. I think there's still a couple of the newer uniform types that are missing from the alternate uniforms list, but the official uniforms list is completely up to date there. Excuse me, sip of coffee. That's better. Acquisitions is maintaining a list of vendors of materials and accessories for uniforms along with approximate pricing. This list must be available to the crew upon request. So it's the quartermaster's job to scan the horizon looking for places where we can buy parts of our uniforms, whether that's pre-made uniforms or perhaps vendors who can help to manufacture uniforms for us. Perhaps it's rank insignia, it's comm badges, perhaps it's replica tricorders or phasers, things like that could be included in our uniforms. It's the quartermaster's job to maintain as comprehensive a list as possible of all of those items. And that is actually published here on the Dauntless Discord. If you look under the operations category and you go to the QM store section there, you should be able to find a lot of different items. It is nowhere near comprehensive, probably never will be. There's just too many moving parts, too many items. But if you are looking for something and it's not listed there, you can post a question and either one of the operations team will respond. Whenever possible, keeping stock of essential items available for crew members to purchase. This is not typically something we encourage because the Dauntless doesn't handle money. We don't have a bank account. We've never asked for dues. We don't keep or maintain money. And it is sometimes a lot easier for us to have custom items, things like our sleeve patches and our caps that are custom made for Dauntless crew members, instead of requiring each crew member to source their own place where they can have those manufactured. It might be easier for us to just have a few in a box. So in the past we have done that. We still have a couple of patches, I think, in a box somewhere. If you are looking for new ones, then you can either place an order with the quartermaster or at least with the operations team, or if we don't have any stock, you can add yourself to a waiting list, and when we have enough people on the list, we'll place an order and gain some stock. Typically that stock would be paid for by an anonymous donation by a member of the crew, and then that person would just recoup their losses as each member of the crew purchases their item, whether it's a cap or a patch or whatever. Then fleet operations would mean collaborating and coordinating with quartermasters within Region 8 Starfleet International, which would include the Starfleet Quartermaster, but also the Starfleet Corps of Engineers, which is one of the big Starfleet auxiliary organizations, now has a costuming department who are a good resource to assist with people assembling uniforms. So that should also be added to that. I'll try and make a note to add that to that description. Qualifications are quite different. There's no need to be an officer for this one, but there are still activity requirements to be a quartermaster. And then the last one on the list that I want to talk about is the communications operator. So again, within the communications team, we've got a chief communications officer, a deputy chief communications officer. The communications department is responsible for, as the name suggests, communication, both internally within the Dauntless and externally and so on. That's generating content, that's processing queries, that's making sure the channels are clean and all that kind of thing. You'll notice that there's a lot of overlap in a lot of these job descriptions, and that is by design. That is to allow members of the crew, duty station holders, to collaborate on doing a lot of tasks so that the full burden doesn't rest on any one person's shoulders. But the communications department is responsible for maintaining all of that kind of thing. And within the communications department, the junior duty station holder there is what we call a communications operator. So a communications operator operates a specific communications channel, responsible for managing the Dauntless's many communication systems such as web forums, chat rooms, or social media groups. The operators are the moderators of the channels, exercising the right to invite, add, scold, kick, or block members of those channels. This station may be held by multiple crew members simultaneously, up to one per channel. So, for example, we could potentially, although we don't currently have any communications operators assigned, we could potentially have one for Discord, one for Facebook group, one for the Facebook page, one for Twitter or X, one for our YouTube channel, one for Instagram, one for TikTok. We could have any number of communications operators because we employ, to varying degrees of activity, a wide variety of channels. It would then be that duty station holder's job to kind of own that channel on behalf of the Dauntless and ensure that there is sufficient traffic happening and whatever communication is happening in that area is being properly looked at. So we're not neglecting private messages or things like that. So the duties there are monitoring the relevant communication channel as often as is convenient, admitting applicants to the channel in accordance with security policies as laid down by the chief security officer, So sometimes that would be the communications operator themselves. Sometimes they would be farming that out to a security officer who could come in and then grant them access depending on the vagaries of the communications channel in question. Seeking command authorization before kicking or blocking a user from a channel. So if you want to remove somebody from a channel, you kind of need command authorization as a basic GD station holder. You might not want to be making that decision on your own. And then publicizing Dauntless activities on the channel. So the communications department generates a fair amount of content about Dauntless activities, our away missions, that kind of thing. And as the communications operator, you want to make sure that that content is represented on your channel. That might involve a little bit of work. It might involve converting formats from video to still images, or writing text, or having text in speech or in a video form, like any number of conversion activities. So that might be fairly complicated, and it could be as complicated as you'd like it to be. If you can find ways of contributing that, that would be great. But you want to make sure that the content that is being published by the communications department is being represented on your channel so that we're not neglecting it. Reports to, as you might expect, the Chief Communications Officer, and there is a relevant set of requirements there. So those are all the different kinds of duty stations. I'm not going to go through all the department heads and deputy department heads. I think you've got a sense of what those look like. But what happens, okay, I'm done with these examples. We can just go back to this now. All right. So what happens if we realize that there is a new requirement that isn't currently covered by a duty station? To start off with, we would have the role absorbed by one of the existing duty station holders, whichever one is closest to the role. But if that was too much work, if it wasn't working, and if we had somebody lined up who was prepared to take on the work, then we would go about creating a new duty station. Now, this would fall under the duties of the command staff, the senior staff, CO and XO, to define what that role would look like. And then with consultation of both the rest of the senior staff and especially the team leadership of the department in question, we would then define and implement a new duty station role. So let's say, for example, we wanted to invent a new ship's counselor role, which is something we've had in the past, but we don't currently have that. It would be up to the command staff, the CO and the XO, to work closely with the chief medical officer and the deputy chief medical officer to define what that role would be, how it would differ from existing duty stations in the medical department, what it would look like, what the requirements would be, and then to implement it and start accepting applicants from there. So that's how we would create a new duty station. It's not a decree from on high like it used to be in the old days. It's now a collaborative process. First, we need to identify that there is a need for the role. Then we'd have to define what that role would look like, and then document it all and make sure that it's properly implemented. Which brings us to the induction process. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail about the induction process. As I said, I've done an entire video about this, but this is the process by which new members are inducted into an existing duty station. So if you are interested in taking on a duty station, the way you would do that is you would submit the relevant application form. You saw the apply here links on all of those pages. You click that link, it takes you to a form in which you're asked questions like, what are your qualifications? Why do you think you'd be good at this? That application would then go to the senior staff, who would then discuss it. If they approve, in principle, your application, you would then go on to an interview, which would be conducted with at least 3 members of the crew, typically a representative of the command staff, either the CO or the XO. It would be a member in that duty station's direct line of report, so the department head of the department in which you're applying for, and then a member of at large, which would be either duty station or standard position holder from the rest of the crew who has been around and been active for at least 5 years. So somebody who has a good sense of the kind of zeitgeist of the vessel. Those 3 people would then submit you to an interview face-to-face, usually on Discord or perhaps in person, depending on the logistics of the situation, and would ask you relevant questions relating to the role. That they would then collaborate and produce a report, which is then presented back to the senior staff, who would then decide on whether or not to proceed. If it's approved, we then go into the activity tracking process. So we would go through all of those prerequisites, making sure that each one of those is checked off, making sure you have all the relevant qualifications, that you're familiar with the relevant tools, and that you are active to the relevant degree as stipulated in the duty station. So have you attended 30% of all Dauntless activities or whatever it might be? Those things are tracked and logged, and if those are all checked off, then we move on to the on-the-job training aspect of it. So somebody who already knows how to use the tools or already already knows how to do the job, will assist you in learning how to or in accessing all the relevant tools you need, learning how to do the things you need to do. And then once you feel confident in doing all of that stuff, we'll then go into the assessment phase, where you'll be tested either using simulations or using live situations on performing the role one by one, making sure that every single requirement that you need to meet has been met off, that you're capable of doing it. And only once everybody is comfortable, yourself included, that you're able to do the job, that's when you are appointed to the position of that duty station. And even then, the induction process will continue after that appointment. We then go into the on-the-job hand-holding process, whereby the senior positions will continue to monitor your progress and will be available to you as a support or as resource indefinitely until you no longer need those training wheels. So that in a nutshell is what the induction process looks like, but we've done a whole video on the induction, and it's a good idea to go back and check that. Another question that relates to duty stations is, what about multi-hatting? Is it possible to wear multiple hats at the same time, to occupy multiple duty stations simultaneously? The short answer is yes. Although we generally prefer that people not do that. We would rather people commit to things that they can actually do, and multi-hatting means that they're taking on a lot of responsibility, and perhaps more than they're able to cope with. So we would discourage it, but it is possible. If you are well established within an existing duty station and you really feel like you have the desire and capacity to take on the duties of a different duty station as well, then you can do that. What you will need to do, though, is decide which one of those two positions is your primary, because that would be the color of your uniform, it would be the title on your email signature and that kind of thing, and which one is secondary. You can, for example, have duty stations in two different departments. You could be in the command department and the communications department simultaneously. Let's say you are the chief communications officer, but you also want to serve as second officer. You could do that, but then you'd have to decide which one of those would be your primary. You could say that I am the second officer first and the chief communications officer second, so that you would wear the red uniform because that is consistent with the command department. That is actually something that I've done in the past. When the Dauntless launched, I was the chief science officer, and then I was appointed the second officer. For a while, I was the chief science officer first and second officer second, and then I flipped around. I became the second officer first, chief science officer second. Then I moved up to EXO, so I had to leave my chief science officer duties behind me, and then a while later, I became the CEO. So multi-hatting is possible, probably not the best idea, but can be done if you really feel like you can cope with it. Which relates to the next question, is stepping down. Once you have a duty station and you feel like you are not interested in doing the work anymore, you can't do the work anymore, you can't keep up with it, how do you step down? Firstly, we hope that you wouldn't want to step down. If you are having a particularly busy month in your personal life or in your day job or something like that, we hope that you would just let us know that you're going to be having a rough time for a little while and that you're going to need some support and to back away from your duties for a bit. That's perfectly acceptable. Life happens. Everybody knows that that kind of thing is likely to happen from time to time. And then the rest of the team is able to typically step in and fill that void for you. But if you know that indefinitely going forward, you're not going to be able to participate, you're not going to be able to do the duties associated with your role, then it is probably best to stand down. Now, there's no form for that. You don't have to fill out an application or go through a reverse induction or anything like that. You can simply message myself or the EXO, and we'll have a conversation about it. And if you really feel like you can't handle the duty station, you are welcome to stand down. If you feel like you can step up for it again at some point in the future, if the position is still available, you'd be welcome to go through the induction process again. If you've already held the position, the induction process would probably be a lot quicker second time around, but it would need to happen again just to be on the safe side. Make sure that you're back up to speed again before you resume that position. All right, so that is everything I need to talk about duty stations. Do we have any more questions or comments? No, we're just talking about tribbles. And also Captain Franklin says he needs a new cap. His is well worn. Mine is also pretty well worn. I also need a new cap. So I believe there's a waiting list right now on the QM store in the Dauntless Discord. So I'll put my name down on the waiting list, and you can do so as well, Captain. And hopefully soon we'll have enough names and we can place another order. All right, but when it relates to duty stations, it's important to remember that the call to serve at a duty station is not just a role, but a testament to your courage and your dedication to our mission. I invite you to step forward, to embrace the challenge, and together we will shape the future of the Dauntless, one act of service at a time. Thank you, everybody. That is all for today. You are dismissed. Swart out.